Train by day, Kyle Wigginton podcast by night, all day.
Valarie Plauche.
You got it.
Is that right?
Yep.
I like it.
Good. It's a New Orleans name.
Very New Orleans name. Yeah. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm actually doing quite well today.
Nice. I love the scarf.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Appreciate it.
There's not many people that can pull that off. I don't think I could. I pull off the bandana well, but I think I need to wait a few more years for a scarf.
Well, I think it's because I'm of my age. You know,
So that's what I'm saying. So whenever I get, a little bit older, I could probably pull one off.
Yeah. So now I'm so eccentric. Like I'm just like, I pull it off. I don't care what anybody thinks.
You're like, fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm wearing this shit.
Like this is what I like.
I like it. That's me with the bandana right now.
No, your bandana looks great on you.
Thank you. So I met Valarie one day. How did we? When was the first time we talked? Was it on the rooftop?
I'm not sure. We're neighbors, actually.
Yeah, we're neighbors. We both are into similar things, but she has more experience with it. The Rudolf Steiner. I love to read Rudolf Steiner's work. She has a lot more experience with Steiner and the Waldorf school systems than I do. And I think that's really what I wanted to talk about today.
Great. Well, I'm really happy to talk about that. And I was very fortunate to have an experience of living in an anthroposophical community for 5 years. Mm-hmm. But I was close to that community for much longer.
So anthroposophical, like what does that mean?
It's the study of the human being.
Okay.
And anthroposophy is the work of Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah, some of the stuff that he does is really cool. The school system that he designed is amazing to me because he actually looks at how the human being evolves through the life cycle, and he tailors the school system to the human being rather than the other way around.
Yes, it's pretty profound, and there are many things within a Waldorf education and in Steiner's work that we're really missing in society. And basically the education is like building up the child and with a lot of intelligence of what the different stages of development are, how to help children get through those stages of development, and the goal of emotional and spiritual maturity, which those are not easy things to win and learn about. And so,
well, obviously, if you just look around society today, you can tell that that they're not easy things for people to get a grasp on.
Yeah. And, even further back than Rudolf Steiner, every ancient culture ever studied initiated their young when they reached the threshold of sexual maturity. Mm-hmm. And that was really trying, this is like the wisdom from around the world, from indigenous cultures. Thousands of them all practiced this. And it was really about making the emotional and spiritual maturity happen when our bodies matured.
Yeah.
And really making the education all based on that. So, but back to Steiner. It was really an unusual situation that I got to really live anthroposophy. And my favorite term right now, and which is like, I love this idea, and I'm sure you will too, multi-generational benevolence.
Ooh.
Multi-generational benevolence based in love, wisdom, and care.
I like that.
So this is what humans are missing, and we're missing it so much we can't even fathom it.
Right.
And, in our distant past, all the wisdom that was gathered from generation to generation was refined and perfected. And those ideas went into structures to support society and to support young people and old people and every other thing.
Yeah.
With those ideas in mind, bringing the best ideas forward generation after generation and really refining them. And, let's say the grandparents would really, when you're older and you've seen a bunch of kids grow up, and you've seen people get married and divorced, and you've seen people grow and die. I mean, so then you've got something to base your ideas on, so it's like the grandparents really bringing forth the wisdom and knowing, oh, right, well, this really works well for children. And, these kinds of structures really support them in their growth. And we have so many things today working against us. and I can't wait to see the world with more systems of benevolent, multi-generational benevolence. And
Well, where did we go wrong? Because I mean, we have people living longer than ever nowadays. So you would think that this knowledge would be passed down, right?
right. Well, if you don't reach emotional and spiritual maturity,
There's nothing to pass down.
there's nothing to pass down.
Right.
And I've known many people that died in their 80s who hadn't reached emotional and spiritual maturity.
That's true. Yeah.
So I just hope we can refocus things in society. But let me talk a little bit about the fellowship.
Yeah.
And because this was this special place that, I evacuated after Hurricane Katrina, and I ended up in New York with my 2-year-old and my ex-husband. And we came to this anthroposophical community because of the school, the Waldorf school. And I had studied Steiner and I knew about Waldorf schools. I had visited some schools prior to that, but actually watching for years, like what was happening. And so, in part, I ended up for 5 years living and working at the fellowship community, which is one aspect of this big anthroposophical community up in New York. And it was a multi-generational community. It was based on the care of elders. And they had a farm, a biodynamic farm, which is so interesting about Steiner because education was just one of his many, many things that he lectured on and had ideas about. But creating living systems for people to thrive in. And, the Waldorf schools obviously try to encourage that. But this particular community was based on elder care, and they had coworkers, which is what I was. And the coworkers lived there with their families. So, I was working a lot, but my daughter could be at work with me all the time.
Nice.
And there were other children. And part of my work was the children's garden, where we had special programs for the children and integrating the children with the elders, the elderly at the community. We had some special needs adults as well. And it was... I wish every community had something like that, where all the generations could come together and celebrate and have meals together. It was very hard work to create this system. People, Dr. Scharf and his wife, Paul and Ann Scharf, it was their vision, and they started it, and they stayed with it day in and day out. Dr. Scharf did not go and play golf or go fishing or anything like that. He put all his forces into creating this community and making it viable. And let's see, for the children, like talk about safe, beautiful environments for children. And, one of the things and Steiner talked about is natural fibers, so in Waldorf education for this young child, they play with wool and wood and natural things and to allow the imagination to develop. And even the dolls, like they don't have a lot of facial features and everything because they want to keep the imagination working. In fact, in Waldorf education, they don't teach the children to read until 7 years old, but they have a relationship with the letters of the alphabet. I mean, it's profound, and how little that we were taught about those things. But every letter has a meaning, and it's mixed in with the sound and a movement. And
So they get like a full body effect when they're learning the letters. It's not just to memorize and regurgitate. They actually embody the letters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's pretty interesting. And I don't know, ask me some questions.
Well, no, I think that's one of the things that helped me with growing up and like my imagination blossom. Is that I grew up on a farm.
That's so cool.
And my family was like, yeah, go explore. Like, go have a good time. Just be back by dinner. So I would be going out every day, and I would take a stick with me and like, just, pretend it was my sword or whatever. I would go out and I would play, and then I would like build these little mechanisms. Like I would build like trot lines and stuff to throw them out in the water and see if I could catch a fish. So, I mean, I was exploring the world that way, which it kind of leads into what I do now. Like I still explore the world. I just now explore it in a different aspect where I explore humans. I want to hear what other people are saying and explore their minds and explore their ideas, where I think I haven't learned enough about the world. There's still things I need to learn, but I have a good idea, a good grasp on it. So now I want to understand humans.
Well, how fortunate that you got to grow up on a farm.
No, I'm so thankful of that. And that was due to my grandparents. Yeah. Like they They knew the importance of like letting a child be a child.
Well, the earth can teach us everything. So in the Waldorf school, they take the children out every day, no matter what the weather. So you have to have all your rain gear and your snow gear, and they go out every single day. And there's also gardens. So they're really learning about gardening and plants. And I mean, you can learn everything from working with the earth.
You're 100% right. And I just like I said, letting a kid be a kid, that's a thing. Like we live in this modern society where, you know, you have a screen in front of your face when you're 1 year old, and parents do this. They give kids iPads and stuff, and they expect the kid to learn from this. It's like, no, the kid needs to learn about the world, not just what a screen looks like.
Well, I think this is I'd like to make a point here about Steiner and screens and content. So Steiner content of what they present educationally to the children is very high vibration, very well thought out by people who love children and want all children to flower, you know, with their unique gifts. And so so there was a media policy, you know, like not having the children watch TV and be on screens and all that kind of thing. And, so there was a lot of awareness around that. And I was already had some awareness going in, but children and adults, we're presented with unlimited content. Mm-hmm. And I always want to know what's in the person's mind who's creating content. What is their purpose? Who are they? How refined is their thinking? Because anybody can make content, and it doesn't mean it's good for the soul. Mm-hmm. And so everything in Waldorf education is very well thought out, that this is good for our soul development. And so much of what's presented, I mean, children should never be subjected to advertisement where they're using creativity to manipulate feelings to sell products. Like, who wants their child to be manipulated?
When you see it at a young age as a child too, it becomes natural. So you just think that this is a thing that exists. So your entire life you grow up and you don't realize that this is manipulation. You think it's just an advertisement.
Yeah, and then who's creating children's content? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want my child or any child to be exposed to anything that's not coming from pure love for children and intelligence about their development. Mm-hmm. And, we can be wounded by those things. We take it in, it becomes part of our subconscious. Yeah. In Steiner education, and anyone, the most intelligent people, right, know that programming the subconscious is really the true education.
Yeah.
And rhythm and repetition and strengthening exercises that are really helping us to, the goal of Waldorf education is, expressing our true spirit.
Well, you said something there. You said unique gifts. You said everyone has born with unique gifts. And I think that's a big problem with the world nowadays is we all have these unique things that we're good at, but the world wants to put you in a box. The world doesn't want you to express your uniqueness. The world wants to make you a slave to the system that we have right now.
Absolutely. And manipulate you. Because without emotional and spiritual maturity, we can be very manipulated. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line.
Sure.
Really.
Yeah.
So there's also, there are forces working against us.
Yeah. No,
becoming emotionally and spiritually mature. Because if you have a high level of maturity, which is hard won, it is not easy to come to maturity. Mm-hmm. It's shadow work, it's really having to wrestle with what's the subconscious. And, a lot of that can be avoided if we do have excellent programming of our subconscious in those first 7 years. So in Waldorf education, they don't teach reading until after 7, because in the first 7 years of life, they really understand that it's the time for the imagination to flourish.
The internal world needs to blossom before you learn how to deal with the external world.
Yeah. So, I'm not an expert in Waldorf education or anything, but it's something like this. Like in the first 7 years, they're focusing on the imagination and really letting the imagination run wild. And then from 7 to 14, they're really working with the emotions and presenting material so that the young people have an emotional connection to the material. So it's really about presenting a lot of different things in an organic way. And then from 14 on, it's making, going intellectually into things you've already had an emotional connection to. So you're already emotionally invested in certain ideas and things. And then when the intellect comes to its full development after puberty, then you go into the things that you've already learned and developed in those other years, and you've got this excitement about because you've made an emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
So having our emotions connected to the material that we're passionate about is what sparks our creativity and our passions and gets us on a course of accelerated, excited learning.
Yeah, it makes you want to continue to learn rather than just go through school and get out of school and start working.
How boring is that?
So boring. I mean, I'm the result of that. Whenever I went to school, graduated college, started working with my degree, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I don't know how I broke out of the box and was like, fuck this, I quit. But I mean, like, I couldn't work the 9-to-5 job. I couldn't get up every day, put on a pair of slacks, button up shirt, and go into this place and just sit behind a desk for the next 40 years of my life.
Well, you've already spent 25 years of your life in grade school and college sitting in a desk with all the desks facing the same way and facing forward, and there's someone in front, and you're just supposed to receive. I mean, it's not an active engagement of anything. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're at another desk. Like, humans were not born to sit in desks.
No, definitely not. That's why I'm so good at what I do now, like, because this is a social aspect. And I think there's a huge social aspect of life, and just being around other people and like engaging with them and creating community around this place right here that we have. Like, it's made my life flourish. Creating community is such a beautiful thing.
I think about how many years we spend at school and how much money we invest in it in time. And, just even as a parent, I mean, it's a lot to get your kids through school. And then there's, I don't know, especially college, you could use that same money and give it to 10 kids that amount of money, and they could create a whole community.
Yeah.
They could be building a community out on some land somewhere.
There's so many great ideas out there and people just can't do them because of certain things.
Well, because we're not really trained in co-creation.
Yeah.
And the kinds of, we were sitting behind a desk and listening to somebody. Anyway, education is, what's mostly presented as education is very outdated.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's crazy that it's outdated too, because Steiner was around in the early 1900s. Like, he died in 1920 or something?
I'm not sure. It's 100 years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, these ideas aren't like they've been around for a while.
Right.
The real question is, why are we ignoring them?
Why are we ignoring them?
The answers are here. Why are we ignoring them?
Why are we ignoring what creates thriving humans?
Yeah.
I'm just holding space for the revival. And,
what does that look like to you?
Oh my gosh, like thriving communities, doing interesting things. In New York, a lot of the college age young people were really into farming. I mean, it was like really in to like get into, so that I communities with gardens.
And by the way, I love what you guys do to they make our space that we live in so freaking beautiful. It's a few other women that just, the garden that you guys create and the flowers and stuff, you take care of those. It's nice.
Yeah. I'm actually really into, especially the fruit trees are my specialty.
Yeah. What kind of fruit trees out there again?
Well, right now, papayas, which is my big thing of getting into the papayas, planted from seeds.
There's some sunflower seeds out there too, right?
The sunflowers. Yeah. Danielle's the flower specialist. Colleen's the potted plant specialist.
Mm-hmm. Oh, she has so many freaking plants.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. How do you even keep that thing alive?
I have no idea.
But yeah, we're really into it. It's like,
but it makes so. For me, I go out there and meditate in the daytime, and it makes my meditation so much more. It enhances that because just being in the nature aspect of it.
Right. And then, we're caring and loving for it, so that's creating an etheric field. One of the things that not very many people understand very much, and they're very concerned with it in anthroposophy, is the etheric field, the etheric body, the etheric field. And, If you go into a home with a lot of love and a lot of cousins and people are really getting along really well and the food's really good, and there's a difference in the air. You walk in, you feel safe, you feel loved, you feel held, you feel like you can be yourself. And, so that's basically a strong etheric field. And humans, we help create, the earth creates an etheric field. We create this etheric field with our love and our intention. So, Waldorf schools, one of the things they don't have, when they build Waldorf schools, they don't, because buildings affects our consciousness. So they don't have any 90-degree angles. They have rounded corners and all these different things because they know how that affects consciousness. But I just think this awareness. So, we could have communities where we're building the etheric. So people, the minute, you build this etheric of warmth. Warmth is also another big topic in anthroposophy with raising children, holding that warmth and creating the etheric field.
Maybe that's why I love meditating in the sun.
Maybe so. I learned a lot about what all that means when I evacuated from Hurricane Katrina, actually. And I had a 2-year-old and, I had created a really comfortable home that would help hold the energy. And then suddenly I was on the road and it was up to me physically to create all that energy to hold my child because my home was gone. So, there's just something about, anyway, what the future would look like would be people creating new communities on land based in, biodynamic farming.
Well, some people don't even know what you're saying when you say that. Like biodynamic farming, like this is not even a concept that people have in their minds.
Or food forests. And the food forest there, I think there's in Vietnam, there's 1,000-year-old food forest. It takes hardly any work at all. And you can eat from it all year long.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I just think, I can't believe in New Orleans, there aren't fruit trees on every neutral ground.
Oh, there should be. They would grow all year, right?
All year round. We could have all our citrus. Why would we ever import orange juice from Mexico?
Yeah.
When we can grow citrus here.
No, I have an aunt that lives in the city and she has her own orange tree in the back of her in her house. So, she has that for oranges year round. So
just a little, but there's organic farming and then there's biodynamic farming, and biodynamic is just a step above. Rudolf Steiner put forth the ideas about it, and many people are practicing it, and it's using everything in the environment. Right. And there's all kinds of interesting things they do, but the food is like a step above organic.
Yeah.
And it's just putting all our intelligence and care into caring for the land and caring for the vegetables. And it's pretty amazing.
Well, humans are so smart. I think that with the law of duality, okay, masculine, feminine, polarities, right? Everything in our universe works in polarities. So for every problem, there has to be an answer already here.
Right. For every poison, there's an antidote.
Yes.
And humans are geniuses.
Yeah, no, it's about just deciphering the people that have these answers and like going, okay, well, we have a problem. Now you have the answer to this. But I think they get lost in translation whenever we're not letting them express their uniqueness. Like you were talking about.
Co-creation is so different than the top-down sort of, the power structures are falling right now, failing and falling. And many of the power structures and the structures that have been in place have been corrupt and abusing power. And, it's very sad that here we are having to face all that, but they're falling apart, and there is going to, I'm really excited, as painful as it is as they fall, about what new is coming.
It's part of the process though, right? You got to break something to rebuild it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like building muscles. Got to break them down to rebuild them.
And what can be built. And so just for an example that, how fortunate I was to be able to live in this community that actually built something out of nothing. And
it's still thriving right now.
It's still thriving. And,
awesome.
I did some research about community building, and they said everyone who decides they want to build a community, a lot of people have these ideas. Of course they do, because it's very natural to want to co-create in community. But 95% of those never get off the ground.
Right.
And the 5% that do, 90% of those don't make it. So this community, working with all these old corrupt systems in place, still managed to get something going, and it's still going. And it's profound, and it's so beautiful, and so many good things happen there. And,
How big is, do you know, like the population there, or what was it whenever you were there?
Okay, well, I think there were 150 people in the community, but it was also next door to the Waldorf school, and there were other communities around that were very interrelated.
Well, I mean, that's still pretty big, because like I don't remember who or what I was reading or watching one time, but they were talking about the maximum size for before humans kind of get out of control. And there's like a maximum size that we're good at being tribes or communities. And then once he gets past that, then it kind of gets
Well, and also there's something like, 150 is sort of the limit of how many people we can know their names.
Yeah, it might be something like that.
Something like that. Then once it's over 150, you can't really remember, it's just like too many people.
That's like me with like 10 people though.
So it was about 150 people, and the elderly would move. It was based in elder care, and the elderly would move there, and they would start out in an outside apartment, and then when they needed care, they could come into the main building. But they had really great activities for for everybody, and it just combining the generations.
Well, yeah, you pass knowledge away down that way.
It was stunning.
Knowledge and life lessons. That's one of the things. One of the things that I've carried with me through life is there have been certain people that have stumbled into my life, and they've said things to me, and at the time they didn't mean anything because I was young, but for some reason those words resonated at a different point in my life. I was like, holy shit, like this guy said this to me, and it makes sense now. Well,
in the ancient cultures, in the tradition of initiating the adolescent, one of the most important elements was being witnessed by elders. And,
what does that mean?
It means
them telling you something?
So no, it's like when we're going through these processes that promote our emotional and spiritual maturity, it's hard work, and it can be hard to stick. Like you can, have this really wild, great realization, but to actually implement it in your life and to bring it really home. And so being witnessed by elders, like having, an older person see you in your processes actually makes it stay, So like, anyway, that's one of the things we've also lost is, we had kind of some generations where we couldn't really trust the elders, unfortunately, because they weren't mature and making decisions that were for the greatest good
today.
And, it's something we really need. I mean, it's kind of like a lot of the elderly are like isolated and have no contact with young people. And anyway, there's so many things we can implement. And, like you're saying, I mean, Steiner put all this information out in the early 20th century. How about Qigong? There's whole systems of very intelligent ways to work with the body and, I don't know, just be really healthy that are 5,000 years old.
Right.
I mean,
so is this where he learned his stuff from? Or
No. He was a mystic. I mean, he was like pulling it right out of the...
Like he was going to the Akashic Records and grabbing it?
Yes. And I used to go to the Steiner Library and... yeah,
you said there was a big library there in New York.
There was a library. And I mean, Steiner, and maybe he sat down and wrote a book, but most of Steiner's books are lectures that people...
The one that I read was a lecture that someone translated.
Yes, but he lectured on every single thing.
Yeah.
Everything.
In his books, the one that I read, it was so dense that it took me months to get through it. I mean, it's just they're ideas that they make sense and they resonate with you, but they're hard concepts to lock down whenever you're reading a book about it.
No, they're very dense, which is why seeing it in action was such an amazing thing because, it's not easy to read Steiner. But I really hope, every child has that kind of right to, first of all, what I really appreciated up there was an awareness of protecting children from media and junk food. I wish everybody, protect what's more important than protecting the young, vulnerable children and preparing them for everything that's going to meet them when they sexually develop.
Yeah.
Right. So this childhood is very short. Mm-hmm. Very short.
And shrinking every year too.
It's getting smaller and smaller. So, it becomes, you just understand how important. It's like the holy of holies is the young child.
Yeah.
And the programming of the subconscious in ways. So let me just do one little Steiner verse because I love there's a lot of verses, and one of my favorite Steiner quotes is "Rhythm restores power." So there's a lot about rhythm, but for instance, they would this little thing, and they would do with the really young children: guarded from harm, cared for by angels, here stand we, loving and bold, truthful and good. And repeating that day after day, getting those concepts fully, and there's movements that go with the words, and so intelligent. And if you think about the difference between that and like cartoons.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up and there was like the Three Stooges, right? Which was like people being really mean to each other and beating each other up and hitting them in the ear and all, it was presented to children. And I remember being a young, in my 20s, and guys my age acting like that,
That's definitely totally different than the Three Stooges, what you just said. Yes. Total opposites.
Yeah. But, just like those cartoons and things, supposedly it's content for children, and we find out that it's really not.
But here's one thing for you with the laws of polarity. We've already established that there has to be a positive and a negative, masculine and feminine. Does there have to be always a good and a bad?
Well, I don't know about, the law of polarity. I know, I'm very interested in that, and in Jungian terms, the conjunction of opposites. There's no question about it that the friction helps us grow. And, how do you create friction if there's no bad? Well, there are ways you can induce friction, and that's, what maybe these, our ancestors, our ancient ancestors that were doing these initiation ceremonies understood, like you need to get pushed to your edge in order to grow.
Right.
And tension creates growth and creativity, and the greater the tension, the greater the potential. So, whether we need evil or not on the scale that we have it now, I don't know.
But do you think those people just haven't went full circle? Because I feel like maybe they just kept pressing the tension down. So they kept being more and more evil rather than actually going, okay, well, I could actually use this for good. Because I feel like you have to accept the fact that you are both evil and good in order to express the good.
Actually, every moment we have to make a choice. And I really like Power versus Force, which is a really amazing book. And I can let you read it if you want.
I would love to, yeah.
And Hawkins, I think I'm blanking on the author's name, but he's a genius. And what he talked about in that book, like every single thing, every thought, every feeling, every person, every piece of fruit can be either you can calibrate it between 0 and 1,000. Like, what's the vibration of that thing? And so within that system, it's like every single thing either weakens us or strengthens us. And so if you keep going down the path that everything you do weakens you and weakens you and weakens you, well, you're just weak.
Yeah.
And then you're very, there are hostile. Steiner talked about this, and I don't think enough people talk about it. There are hostile spiritual forces. And when you weaken yourself continually with bad choices, you're really open yourself to being manipulated.
Yeah.
So, it's like whether it's good and evil or strengthening and weakening, they're just like different words.
Well, there are so many
But every moment we have to make the choice.
Yeah. Well, there are so many people that don't like to talk about the whole spiritual aspect of it, or the demons or the entities that could take over. But if you look at any spiritual religion, anything like that, there are always demons that they talk about. The fact that we ignore them today as pseudoscience also says something about our society. But these things exist.
Right. Well, I think that with a really strong foundational education, well directed, with a lot of free time and play and all that kind of thing, you're more immune. So all the things that create our strength and radiance, right, which would be being breastfed, you're having the mother at home, at least for the first 3 years, full time, having the mother very supported so that she's able to give all this care. The more things that strengthen us in programming, optimal programming of the subconscious in the first 7 years, we're more immune to the evil forces. The more you build up your radiance. And that's, definitely Waldorf education works on that. And I just wish, I want and I wish and I see it, that just more awareness of child development and who's creating the curriculums, and how much love in their hearts do they have? How many, it's not just a head thing,
Well, I chime into like podcasts and stuff sometimes if I get like live streams on Instagram. And if I see people talking about live streams about educational systems, I always chime in with the Waldorf school systems. And there are so many people that have no clue what that even is. And I don't think I would have either if I wouldn't have stumbled across Rudolf Steiner. So, I think...
I had to go a very alternative path to actually find any... Let me just tell you a little about education, because I actually went through traditional education, graduated from Loyola, joined the Army after that for 3 years. And then I ended up in an alternative school in Colorado, a Buddhist college. And it was stunning. And I learned more in those couple of years that I stayed there. We always were in circles. We were, the classes were... What is your, how does that resonate with you? We were talking about the information that we received, like how it actually affected us personally. And what happened in that environment was we became intimate with our classmates very quickly, and we bonded. And so I could have been studying history at a traditional university for 4 years with the same people and have no closeness to them at all.
Never spoke to anyone in college. I didn't.
Well, even if you talk to them, it's very shallow. But when you're sitting in a group and you're talking and everybody's bringing to the table how that information landed on them and how they grew through it and how they resisted it or whatever, it created an environment of real intimacy.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. I didn't even know what I was missing.
Well, they're showing their vulnerability. Like that's me. One of the reasons I never said anything in college is because I didn't want, if I didn't know the answer or if I got the answer wrong, I didn't want to be vulnerable. But anytime that you're being vulnerable with the people around you, you're like, oh shit, it's just a human. Like we're all humans. We're all making mistakes. We're all vulnerable. We all are trying to figure this out.
Education should be about learning to work with our vulnerabilities and how to ask for support. I mean, there's some really key things that we really need by the time we reach adolescence. Discernment, to teach discernment, decision making, how to ask for help, all these things, we have, they're
not taught in the state school system. Not at all. Like, I went through, public school and stuff in Arkansas, and none of these things were taught. Luckily, I went to I lived in a very small town, so the school was relatively small. So I knew everyone I went to school with. So the ability to have a community was there, but just the educational part of it was nothing. Like you didn't want to be there. You didn't want to learn what they're actually teaching. I'm sure there are a lot of people that went to school that never developed the imaginational aspect of it because they didn't have the same environment that I did when I was growing up. Like luckily for me, I was on the farm exploring. These other people, they probably didn't have that. They weren't fortunate to have that like area to go and explore. So they probably just went through school, memorized and regurgitated. They never even developed an imagination.
Obedience to authority is the main thing you learn in a school system where you sit at a desk with a teacher in front and everybody's sitting in a row and raising your hand. And that is obedience to authority.
Yeah, you can ask anyone. I didn't learn that one.
Right. Well, that's what they're shoving down our throats.
I respect no authority.
Which is the wrong lesson, right? Because we really need to be sovereign. And that is, we can nurture that and strengthen that.
Well, it's not that I want to fight authority, but I would like to have a debate with any authoritative figure or anyone who thinks themselves as an elite or an authority figure. I would debate them down any day in front of the public too. So, Latoya Cantrell, come and get it. Like I think that the world could run in all systems we have could run way more smoother than they are right now. But I think that people's greed and corruption gets in the way of prosperity and progress.
Well, I agree. And that's why I'm talking about multi-generational benevolence, because we're actually coming out of like multi-generational trauma. Your whole life can be healing from trauma.
Yeah.
It's it's everywhere.
Yeah. We all have it.
And that's, we also have connection to our ancestral lines.
The karmic.
At some time before that there was, that's our birthright, is multi-generational benevolence.
Yeah, I like that. I've never heard that before. I
made it. I came up with that little phrase in my journal in the last few days, because I'm like, what do I stand for?
It's good.
And multi-generational benevolence. And that's our birthright. And it breaks my heart that we can't hardly even imagine it.
Yeah.
Because we've been so separated from it, when it is absolutely our birthright. I mean, like all this debate that's happening now about abortion, I know it's a hot topic right now, and there's so many things around it of, when you come into like multi-generational benevolence and you start looking at promoting emotional and spiritual maturity and what that looks like, and that nobody has power unless they have maturity, which is really, imagine just that. In those kinds of societies, when you're living in multi-generational benevolence, being a parent, your job's kind of done when they hit puberty. You've set them up, you've strengthened them so much that they're not going to be manipulated or coerced and all those kind of things. You've given them the right skills, and then they get to go out and explore society that's safe. And explore and go on their adventures and everything like that. It's not like the parent has to stay fully a lot of people are still dependent on their parents well into their 50s because there's nothing out there for us.
Well, if all the parents do their jobs too, then society's going to be a safer place.
Right. I mean, I would like to see, when young children are going to school, that the parents go to school with them, because you're just supposed to go to school for the first 25 years and learn to be obedient to authority, and then you get a job, and then you send your kids to school. I mean, everyone needs to keep learning. Learning is a lifelong adventure. Yeah.
I mean, that was one of the cool things I realized about the Waldorf school systems, was that they had the same teacher all the way throughout the school.
Well, they try to do that. It's not that easy, to keep the same teacher from first to eighth grade.
Right. Yeah, this is really cool, because I mean, the teacher actually gets to learn the kids. Like nowadays, the way they have it is 30 kids to a classroom, and you have 7 classes a day or something like that. And you do this every single year. Like there's no way the teachers can learn.
And you switch from classroom to classroom.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure, I know there's some really great teachers out there, but
the school system we have is designed to confuse people, not to actually educate them.
I just hope we see it crash and burn, and beautiful things return and come in their places. My daughter's at a really exciting college right now, and it's very kind of Waldorf-y.
Oh, really?
It's Warren Wilson in North Carolina, and it's a work-based program. So everybody works. All the maintenance is done by the students, and it really, these work teams,
good idea,
make it happen for the kids.
Yeah,
it brings a different kind of investment, and I don't know, it's pretty exciting. They also have a farm, an organic farm, and animals around. And
are there more schools that do these kinds of things, like more colleges?
Well, not enough.
Yeah, because I mean, that's a cool thing to do.
Yeah. I think it's the only. I think they call it a work-based.
You said Warren
Wilson.
Okay.
College. It's right outside of Asheville, North Carolina. And I found my way to Naropa back in the 90s, and there was also a garden there, and I don't know, it's just a different kind of community where people really grew, through relationships with one another, and the environment really fostered that. It was pretty special.
Valarie, you have any stimulating words for the audience before we wrap this guy up?
Multi-generational benevolence based on love, wisdom, and care. We all deserve it. Believe in it, and yeah, I'll meet you there.
I love it. Thank you for coming in today, Valarie.
Thank you.
We'll have you in again for sure.
All right, sounds good.